Common plants and animals in different marine habitats. This slide collection illustrates the diversity in the Tasmanian marine environment. It introduces some aspects of the ecology of a selection of plants and animals found in 6 different marine habitats in Tasmania. The intertidal zones of a low-energy beach or mudflat, a medium-energy beach and a high-energy rocky platform, a subtidal kelp forest, deep reef and the open ocean. The intertidal zone is a very stressful area because of the desiccation and overheating at low tide, as well as the wave energy. Only specialized organisms can withstand the harsh conditions. The amount of wave energy has a big influence on what can live on the shore because of the physical force that has to be withstood and the amount of food and oxygen the waves provide. The deeper water is a much more moderate environment with relatively small changes in temperature, current or food and oxygen supply. However, the reduction in light as the water gets deeper has a big influence on what can survive there. The low-energy beach. Ralphs Bay, Eastern Shore, Hobart is an example of a low-energy beach. The tide runs in and out with minimal force and so can carry only the smallest particles of sand and mud into the bay. There is no wave action to stir up and aerate these fine sediments, so that the sand is black and smelly only a few centimetres below the surface due to the lack of oxygen. The plants and animals do not have to be adapted to physical force, but are often buried to escape the sharp eyes of the multitudes of shorebirds that frequent the mud flats. Digging up some sand and putting it through a sieve will reveal a world hidden under the surface. Most of the shells on the surface are dead and empty, but are an indication of what lives below the mud. Green algae grow on the surface of the mud in areas of low wave action. The green colour is from the chlorophyll pigment which the plant uses to convert the sun's energy to chemical energy, giving off oxygen. Its photosynthesis helps to aerate the quiet shallow water and provides food for the herbivores. Its simple holdfasts trap the particles of sediment so they are not washed away. Algae, including drift phytoplankton, are the primary producers of the sea, providing the basis of the food web in the ocean and most of the oxygen in our atmosphere. Fragile air breathers are snails that graze on the surface algae. Their shells do not have to be strong because there are no waves to withstand, and they probably rely on camouflage to protect them from the birds. As their name states, they breathe air while the tide is out and probably hold a bubble of air in their shell while underwater. They pull themselves through the mud using their muscular foot, feeding on organic matter in the mud. Sunset or sunray shells. They are usually white, but may be pink and orange, the colour of the sunset. When alive, their shells are covered with an unattractive brown coating. These bivalves bury themselves just below the surface of the mud using a tube-like siphon to draw down surface water to breathe. All mollusks, which include snails and bivalves, are hermaphrodites. That is, they have both male and female sex organs. However, they have to mate with another animal, so each injects the other with sperm to fertilize their eggs. The bristleworm. This active worm swims through the soft sediment using the paddles and bristles on each segment. It actively preys on smaller animals and any dead organic matter. You will find hundreds of these if you dig up a few spades full of mud and wash them through a fine sieve. Beware of handling them because the bristles can severely irritate your skin and eyes. Scavenger snails, or impoverished Nasarius, are common on sand and mud flats where they scavenge dead plant and animal material. They probably clean up what the major predators on the mud flats, shorebirds such as oyster catchers and herons, leave behind. Predaceous snails can be recognized by the groove at one end of their opening, which holds the siphon that is used for detecting their prey. The medium energy beach. Bridport Beach on the north coast is an example of a beach with medium wave energy, leading to a shallow beach with fine sand. Again, the smooth surface, washed clean every tide except for some flotsam, hides a variety of animals that live and feed below the sand. They need to remain buried to withstand being dislodged by the wave action and predated by the shorebirds when the tide is out and fish when the tide is in. Seagrass is often washed up on sheltered bays and beaches because it grows in the shallow water just offshore. It differs from seaweed because it is a flowering plant like most plants on the land, has true roots and produces tiny white flowers underwater. Seagrass beds provide a very important marine habitat because they slow the current, causing the sediment to settle and provide shelter in bays for juvenile fish and mollusks. They are threatened or dying out in many places due to erosion of soil and leaching of fertilizer from the surrounding land. The soil, in combination with the algal blooms stimulated by excess nutrients, cut down the light that the plants need to grow. Beach clams and cockles, Dicinia and Fulvia, are two of the most common bivalves washed up on the beach. Dicinia has a very thick greyish-white shell with an asymmetrical beak or umbo, while Fulvia has a thin shell that is easily crushed, with a pink tinge on its umbo. Both live buried in the sand below low tide, with their long siphons drawing in water from the surface to provide them with food and oxygen. There are many other bivalves that are often washed up on the beach, too many to show here, but they are well illustrated in many shell books. King scallop is probably more familiar to you as a shell on the beach or a small white medallion of meat with an orange crescent on your dinner plate. When living underwater, they rest on the sand on their concave valve with their valves partly open, showing their mantle with rows of tiny blue eyes and short tentacles. If they are approached, they clap their two valves together like a set of false teeth and jet away in a series of jerky movements designed to escape predation. Unfortunately, this behaviour does not escape the dredge. New Zealand screw shells. They are washed up on their hundreds on many beaches. They were probably introduced from New Zealand along with oysters at the turn of the 19th century. They have now invaded most of our waters in large numbers and are spreading along the New South Wales coast. They are competing for food and displacing our native animals, and they are classed as a marine pest. Spindle shells are one of our more beautiful shells often found on the beach. Pure white when dead, they are covered with a brown coat when alive, and the animal that lives inside the shell is red. They live in the sand just offshore and prey on bivalves buried in the sand. The long spindle supports its long siphon that it uses to detect its prey and breathe with when under the sand or buried in its prey. The banded stingaree is a common sight, but it is usually well camouflaged as it lies partially buried in the sand just offshore, with only its eyes above the surface. It can be rather startling when it breaks from cover and swims away after being disturbed. Beware of the poisonous spines on its tail, which can cause serious injury. Although it is a primitive fish related to sharks, stingarees give birth to live young. The spotted handfish lives on the sand or mud in the deeper, calmer water offshore from sheltered beaches. It is only about 120 millimetres long and sits motionless on the sand, camouflaged by its irregular brown spots. When it moves, it walks or hops along on its hands and can turn on very fast bursts of speed. Its first fin is modified to form a lure to attract prey of tiny crustaceans. In this photograph, it is guarding a clutch of eggs that it has wrapped around the stalk of a sea squirt. It is one of the few listed endangered fish species, as it is restricted to the Greater Derwent Estuary. Its population has declined drastically in the last few years, perhaps as a result of the pollution of the river or the introduced northern Pacific sea star, which may prey on the fish, its eggs, or may be removing the habitat conditions it needs to lay its eggs, such as the stalked ascidian. Recent attempts to improve its breeding success have found that it is quite happy to wrap its eggs around artificial plastic rods instead of the stalked ascidian. The high-energy rock platform. Tasman Peninsula Blowhole Rock Platform is a high-energy coastline, as can be seen by the huge waves crashing onto the rocks. The plants and animals here have to be very tough and firmly attached to withstand the huge wave forces. You can see the tops of the very tough and leathery bull kelp protruding above the water. Intertidal zone at low tide shows the typical variety of animals that are found there. Two varieties of mussels are very common on most intertidal coastlines: the larger edible mussel and the tiny mat-forming mussels, either the beaked mussel or the little black horse mussel. They are tightly closed at low tide to stop them drying out in the sun, but when the tide comes in they open to filter particles of food out of the water. They are firmly attached to the rocks by abyssal hairs to withstand wave action. The other brown animals are conjovoi. At low tide they also open their two siphons to filter matter out of the water. They belong to the sea squirt family, so named because when squeezed they squirt out a stream of water from one of their siphons. Sea lettuce is very common in the intertidal zone. It is firmly anchored, but its soft lamina flows with the current. Like other green seaweed, it is also a primary producer. Brown and red seaweeds that are also found in the intertidal zone, although they do not look green, also contain green pigment which harnesses the sun's energy. Kelp snails living on this brown seaweed are examples of many herbivorous animals that feed directly on the plant energy. Every snail has a tongue or radula with rows of fine sharp teeth for rasping off its food. New rows of teeth replace the old as they wear out. These snails are collected by Aboriginal people to make necklaces because of their beautiful iridescent shells. Abalone are really giant snails with a very flat coiled shell. They are also herbivores that graze on algae growing on the rock surface. Abalone take about 5 years to reach the legal fishing size of 132 millimeters across the shell. You will notice that they support their own collection of alga and encrusting animals which help to camouflage them, particularly from mammalian predators. They have a very strong foot muscle which anchors them very firmly to the rock's surface. That is the muscle that is prized for food. If you look closely, you can see small black snail feelers at the head. The pencil urchin gets its common name from its stout spines, which are rather like old-fashioned slate pencils. Beware of the sharp spines on other urchins, which can cause a nasty wound if they break your skin. Soak the wound in very hot water to prevent irritation and infection. All urchins are grazers, using a set of 5 strong white teeth to rasp the algae on the rocks. During the day and when wave action is strong, they remain wedged into rock crevices, but at night they move around to feed. They return to the same crevice after feeding. Young urchins are a favoured food of lobsters, but large urchins have very few enemies except birds and humans. If the numbers of lobsters are reduced by overfishing, the urchin population can explode, preventing young algae from establishing, creating urchin barrens that are now common in New South Wales. The bubble anemone is one of many different species of sea anemones found on rocky shores. The pretty flower-like polyp is actually a predator. Its sticky tentacles are a lethal trap to any passer-by that touches them. On contact, they immediately fire hundreds of tiny harpoons into the skin of the animal, and then release a poison which can even kill fish. All related animals, such as other anemones, corals and jellyfish, have stinging tentacles with darts for feeding and defense. Some of them are strong enough to penetrate human skin, and so cause stinging and sometimes allergic reactions, for example jellyfish. The swimming anemone is often found attached to kelp or drifting near the shore. This harmless-looking soft bag is another predator. At night it climbs up the fronds of the kelp and extends its sticky tentacles to trap passing food particles from the water. When it wants to move, it can let go and swim or drift to another hunting spot. The sex life of this group of animals is not very exciting. They all release their eggs and sperm into the water and trust to chance that they meet up with some form from another animal. However, some anemones, such as the common red waratah anemone, retain their eggs and fertilize them with sperm from the surrounding water and then give birth to live young. The rockpool shrimp is very common in rock pools and reefs, but is often overlooked. It is only small, about 5 centimetres, and almost transparent except for its red striped ankles. By day it hides in rock crevices, but at night, like its crab and lobster relatives, it comes out to feed on algae and scavenges on any dead animals. In this way, rockpool shrimps help to keep the pools clear of rotting rubbish. This sea star is a common sea star on many exposed shallow reefs in Tasmania. It is about 20 centimetres across and is very striking, with many small round raised plates covering the body and arms. These range in colour from white to orange and brick red and can form striking patterns. Sea stars glide along on hydraulic tube feet, which can be seen in grooves on their undersides. In spite of only moving slowly, most sea stars are predators on other animals. This species preys on sponges and other encrusting animals and plants. Sea stars have a novel way of eating out. They sit on top of their prey, invert their stomach onto it, and digest it outside their body, then absorb the nutrients. The cartwright shell is another predator which is found in every rock pool and crevice around the Australian coast. Its white shell, about 7 centimetres long, has distinctive cartwrights across it. This cartwright has just laid a batch of leathery eggs, which are often seen in rock pools. The eggs have recently been found to contain a powerful antibiotic chemical. Shaw's cowfish is a very distinctive boxfish, often seen hovering around the weed growing on reefs. They grow from tiny babies only about 1 centimetre to about 25 centimetres long. The animal in the photograph is a female or juvenile with orange-brown stripes forming a bullseye on its head. The less common males have blue and yellow spots and stripes. They are weak swimmers, so they shelter in the weed to protect them from strong currents. They feed on small animals in the sand that they expose with a jet of water. The big-bellied seahorse is another fish that hides and shelters in the weed because it is a weak swimmer. Seahorses use their tails to hold on to the weed. They feed on tiny shrimp-like animals that they suck into their small mouth. Seahorses have unusual mating behaviours. When the female is ready to lay her eggs, the male courts her by puffing up his belly to entice her to lay her eggs into his pouch. The pregnant male then incubates the eggs until he gives birth to fully formed miniature adults. All seahorses and related species are protected in Tasmania, so they cannot be collected. A Tasmanian company is breeding the big-bellied seahorse for export to Asia for the medicine trade and aquarium trade. The kelp forest. Large forests of string kelp grow offshore in the cool waters of southern Australia and Tasmania. As the name forest suggests, these plants provide a very important local habitat for many other plants and animals. The size and number of kelp beds around Tasmania have decreased over the past 100 years. Researchers are trying to find out whether warmer weathers, pollution or overfishing has changed the balance in the ecosystem to reduce the extent of the kelp forests. String kelp. This photograph shows a close-up of the string kelp that makes up kelp forests. It has long rope-like stems and air bladders at the base of the fronds that help float them up to the surface near the light. They are one of the fastest growing plants in the world, growing up to 50 centimetres a day to a height of at least 30 metres from the seafloor. This species grows in southern Tasmania, while a similar but smaller species grows along the northern coast. The weedy sea dragon. This brightly coloured fish with leafy appendages is surprisingly well camouflaged among the kelp on the semi-protected reefs. It is a swimmer because of its rigid body and tiny fins. Therefore it does not move very far from its home reef and is vulnerable to being washed away by storms. Sea dragons related to seahorses are very unusual in the animal world because the male broods the eggs embedded in the skin under his tail for several weeks until they hatch out into miniature adults. The Tasmanian Marine Naturalists Association is carrying out a volunteer weedy sea dragon search. So please report any seen while diving, snorkeling, fishing, or found washed up on the beach to the TMNA, care of 102 Bathurst Street, Hobart, 7000. The draftboard shark is seen fairly often cruising along the edge of Tasmanian reefs or in the kelp forest. Although it may grow to 1.5 metres long, it is harmless to people. It probably feeds on mollusks and crustaceans. Its brown horny eggs with long tendrils are often washed up on beaches after storms. The deep reef. A reef scene. In the deeper water there is not much light for photosynthesis, so very little seaweed can survive. Instead, every available surface is covered by animals. This slide shows a variety of orange tubular and grey sponges, and orange and brown curled fronds of sea mosses or bryozoans. Jewel anemones are colonial anemones that occur in a myriad of colours: white, pink, orange, yellow and purple. A colony expands by producing more polyps of the same colour. They are often found encrusting jetty pylons, rock overhangs, or, as in this photo, sea whips. Each stinging tentacle has a distinctive knob on the end. The sea fan is a soft coral with a horny skeleton that supports a colony of polyps. Sea fans usually grow in very deep water, but in Tasmania they also grow in shallower water. In areas with good currents, the tentacles trap small organisms out of the water flowing through the fan. These fans were photographed in about 20 metres of water in the Governor's Island Marine Reserve, Bicheno. Stony coral. This solitary coral polyp, about 2 centimetres across, is a relative of the large reef-building corals of the tropics. It is one of the few stony corals that grow in colder water. It is generally found in deeper water and usually only puts its tentacles out to feed in the dark, such as at night, but also in caves. This polyp was photographed in only 13 metres of water in a cave on Ile de Phoc, East Tasmania. The basket star is really a sea star with very flexible arms divided into many branches. In the dark, at night or in caves, it extends its arms like a basket to over 30 centimetres wide to catch organisms floating past. By day it curls its arms up around its support. This sea slug is one of the more conspicuous sea slugs, not only because of its bright colours but also because of its size. It can grow to about 15 centimetres long. It lives on moderately exposed reefs from very shallow to deep water. Sea slugs are snails without shells, so that their gills are naked on their backs, giving it its other name, nudibranch. In this photo you can see the small feelers on its head, and if you look closely you can also see a tuft of tentacles near its tail. These are its naked gills. Squid are related to snails and oysters, but do not have hard shells. Some species have a soft internal shell called a gladius. The muscular foot has been transformed into 8 arms each with 2 rows of suckers, plus 2 longer tentacles that are used for catching prey and mating. Their eyes are about the same size and quality as ours. Squid move by jet propulsion, jetting water out through a narrow siphon that can be pointed in any direction. Hydroid medusa are one of the many related animals that drift at the mercy of the ocean currents, such as jellyfish and bluebottles. All these are colonies of polyps with stinging tentacles that catch anything, including fish, that blunder into them. They are often washed up into bays and onto beaches by strong onshore winds. Large drifts of jellyfish often accumulate against fish farm nets, and their stings distress and even kill the fish inside the nets. The southern right whale is one of the whales commonly seen in Tasmanian waters in the spring, coming into sheltered bays of the east coast, such as Adventure Bay, Bruny Island, to give birth. Right whales feed on tiny shrimp-like krill that they sieve out of the water through sheets of horny baleen in their mouths. They got their name because they were the right whales to kill. Whales are mammals like us that breathe air, so they must come to the surface at intervals to breathe. The spout is actually water vapour that forms when they exhale through their nostrils, or their blowhole, on top of their heads, as when we exhale on a cold day. Southern right whales have two blowholes, and hence two V-shaped spouts, which distinguish them from the other whale often seen in Tasmanian waters, the humpback, which has only one spout. Individual whales can often be recognised by the colour and shape of their fins, the patches of barnacle on their head, or some other distinctive marking.